Do you want to deliberately talk about bonding with your child? Well, it's a really good idea. I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I talk all over the world about parenting, good communication, and how to build those strong family bonds. And I do my teaching through the lens of the principle self-government. In this video, we're going to be talking about bonding. In this video, I'm going to be sharing a true story from someone that I know and how they were able to fix a relationship with a child who had RAD, which is reactive attachment disorder, which can be a really hard one, and some of the tips that I gave them and how that worked out. And we'll be talking about key things that you can do if you want to bond better with your child too. So recently I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she was talking about her son who has RAD, reactive attachment disorder. Now, when a person has RAD, that means that they have a hard time with the bond. Something happened with the bond early on that made it so that there's like this disconnect between them and somebody they want or should bond to. Sometimes it's even with almost everyone. They just have this like distance where they really can't bond. Oftentimes trauma can cause this, or when certain needs are not met, when a person is at a really young formative age, when they need to have that increased amount of time bonding and connecting with a parent. If they had a parent who was, say, maybe narcissistic, controlling, confusing, something like that, then that can also make it so that they can end up with a RAD situation. Sometimes there can be things affecting a person also in, utero that can even make it hard for them to bond. But in most cases, reactive attachment disorder happens when the right bonds weren't formed at the right times. Although that's not always the case. Well, in this case, this child did happen to be adopted. And there were some attachment issues that were stemming from the baby years with this child, and the mother was trying so much to try to help the child create a good bond, and other siblings of this child were also adopted by this friend of mine, and some of these other siblings actually did much better at fixing their bond than this one child. He seemed to have more trauma than everybody else, and bless my friend's heart, she patiently just carries on with these children and with this son, working so hard at trying to bond, but it gets very discouraging. And I think sometimes she's maybe struggled a little bit with her calmness because of the belligerent nature of the child, his rudeness, his raging, all those kinds of things that can happen with a child with RAD. And she came to me and said, Nicholeen, what can I do? How can I help this child? Because am I ever going to be able to help this child? Am I ever going to be able to improve the bond? And I looked at her and I said, yes, you can. Can you make it? See, I think some people say all hope is lost. It's a lost cause. But here's the thing. I had children who were in my home who did therapeutic treatment care in my home, and some of them had RAD, very extreme behaviors. And they act like they don't care, and even if they are bonding, it sort of seems fake. Like you just don't get that same connection that you wish you could have or that you experience with other people. And so the mother started to think of this child as the problem for the family. But what I knew was that actually a person could improve, because some of the foster children that I had living with me had RAD, and they actually made progress. Now, did they still bond exactly like everybody else? No. I mean, sometimes there were differences, but did they make progress? Did they learn how to allow themselves to open up to other people and to trust other people and to bond with those people? Yes, we did have great success at that. So I gave her some suggestions, which is what I want to share with you now, because whether your child is dealing with something that's non-neurotypical like reactive attachment disorder or ADHD or something like that, or whether your child is just disconnected from you and not wanting to bond with you, then these same principles and skills are going to be helpful for you. So we're going to talk about how to go about deliberately bonding, but before we do you see that little button that says subscribe that's here on the page? Click the subscribe button. That button will open the floodgate of Nicholeen Peck videos because they come out all the time. And don't forget to also click the notification bell, because when you click click that. It will let you know when there is a new video. All right, so let's talk about being deliberate with our bonding. Step number one, we've got to decide that it's okay to deliberately talk about it. We need to deliberately talk with our children about our relationships. So often we go on day after day having relationships, sometimes relationship successes, sometimes relationship problems, but we don't deliberately talk about them. Have you noticed that? This is kind of like the human tendency. In fact, I think sometimes as humans, we think it's weird to just start talking about the way we're talking, or to start talking about the way that we're moving or behaving or assimilating or all of those kinds of things. But did you know the highest, most effective level of communication is a very deliberate type of communication where you talk about what you're going to talk about before you actually have the official conversation? Interesting, isn't it? So when people are very deliberate and they talk about the way they discuss as a family, they are doing the highest level of communication. They're going to have the best results. So you've got to get over the weird of being deliberate and talking about all the things you never talk about, because you just got to do it. Because it's going to help you be effective, which means that you need to not think about how awkward it could seem, especially that first or second or 10th time. But once you get in the habit of being deliberate and communicating openly and deliberately about all of these things that you need to discuss in your relationship, it will become more of a second nature for you. I promise, because I definitely was the more like manipulative, keep it inside, think about it, assume things about other people, try to get them to go a different direction without talking about it. That's my nature. That's how I used to be. But now I'm deliberate about everything. And that deliberateness has paid off in really good relationships. And actually, I don't think you'd be listening to me right now if I hadn't decided to just be the deliberate version of me. Because that's the basis behind everything I teach at teachingselfgovernment.com. So you're going to have this first conversation with your child. What in the world is that going to be like? So you maybe pick a time where you can be just together, the two of you, and you say, okay, so let's talk about our relationship. I've noticed that lately it feels like this. Have you noticed? They might say yeah, they might say no, and then say, well, you know, even if the feeling's just on my side, we got to talk about it, because we really need to always be talking about the way we want to communicate. And if we're not doing it right, we need to fix it. If I'm doing something that ends up making life hard for you, I want to know about it. And I think the other way, around is going to be effective as well. So let's talk about what we want out of our relationship. So now you're going to pick a time in the future. Maybe it's 5 years down the road, and you say, let's look at 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, and you're an adult, you've got a family of your own. What do you want it to feel like? When we are together, what do you want it to be like? How do you want to think about each other during that time? Oh, now we're getting somewhere. And so you start creating this picture of who you're becoming, the things that are going to matter to you. And then you say, okay, if we're going to become that type of, father, son, or, father, daughter, or whatever it is in the future, then we've got to start practicing now. How are we going to practice? And what are we going to do when we notice it's going off track? And how are we going to check to make sure that we are staying on track? All of these questions, the answer is self-government, self-government, self-government. So when a person is self-governing, they analyze what's going on. They analyze their actions, who they are, who the other people are, what direction they're headed, what they want to accomplish, meaning their effects or results they want to get. And then as they go along, they analyze cause and effect, and they fine-tune it again and again. So this means just because you have this conversation, you're not going to be perfect in your relationship out of the chute. You're not going to be perfect in your bonding. So you're going to say, okay, what do we want for our bonding? What do we want it to feel like? Well, that sounds nice. How are we going to work on this? So now you've got a plan. Hopefully you'll have skills and principles that you're going to be using that you can fall back on. And all of those things are talked about in my course, which is the TSG Parenting course, which stands for Teaching Self-Government Parenting course. That's on teachingselfgovernment.com. You definitely can find more information there as far as all those skills and things you're going to teach ahead of time. And of course, there's other videos that I have that go into detail about the skills. But then what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, so this is what we want. So that means we have to have a certain kind of a bond. What is a bond? So now you're going to talk to your child about what it really means to bond, this connection, this feeling of connection, feeling of not connection. You may even try to practice having the bond and not. Some parents may get out manipulatives like magnets and see how they're pulled toward each other, or when they're turned the wrong way, they repel each other. There's a big lesson in that. When you are turned the wrong way with each other, you will not bond or attach properly. You have to keep things turned the right way, which means the whole family, or at least in that relationship between you and your child, you have to have the hearts turned toward each other. I actually have an entire video about turning hearts, so you may want to look at that at some point, because that's going to really help you with turning hearts as well. But I know that some people, their bond is struggling because the child doesn't know how to bond, such as this one woman I'm talking about. I do know that sometimes children are just choosing not to bond because they don't want you to know what's going on in their life. They want some privacy. They want you to step away. They want to control you. That could be an issue too. Either way, you need to talk about getting yourselves right with each other, turning your hearts in the right direction, and then regularly have time to connect. When you're correcting, when you're teaching connect, you should feel closer to your child during and after a correction than you even did before. And that's on your side, because you get to decide how you feel about them when you talk to them. They get to decide how they feel about you when they talk to you. Okay, so you get to pick that side of the relationship. So those times you can feel connected to them, even if they're pushing you away. But you also have to have times that are not about corrections and teachings. You've got to have those moments where you're doing things together. Maybe you go on a trip together. You might need 3 days, just the two of you, to reinvent your relationship again, because maybe you've been too busy and you've just been too disconnected so that it's hurt the family bond. When the bond is hurt, you could also have other things happening there, like distrust or something like that. And so we want to make sure that we allow our children to see our best intentions. That means we need to do things with them and strengthen relationships, talk about baseball games and arts and crafts and, trips and marine animals. Talk about things besides the relationship too. So deliberately talk about the relationship and then deliberately talk about other things too. Then that will open the door to allow you to continually deliberately talk about the relationship as you have weekly checkups with your child. Now in the TSG parenting course, we do something called mentor meetings. These are one-on-one meetings with the child, and those are going to be the perfect time to do those daily catch-ups. Now we have just scratched the surface here on connecting and improving the bond deliberately with your child. There are so many more things that I could share with you about that, and I'm recommending that your next stop on this channel be a video, which is actually an entire class called The Not So Known Secret for Parenting Success. Click on the link to that video now. I'll see you there.